What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. So today I just wanted to talk about my personal approach to writing for solo strings, and I'm going to be using the Orchestral Tools Berlin Solo Strings as our library of choice today. I chose this library because it just came out a couple weeks ago, and personally I really love solo string libraries that have this sort of certain aesthetic that fits into the sort of styles of music that I personally write for. So I personally like to write more longer melodic passages, lush string lines, ones that don't involve tons and tons of articulation switching, or let's say neoclassical approaches with lots and different types of artistic techniques. I personally love more simple pieces with more warm, melodic shapes, and that's sort of my personal aesthetic. And I feel like this sort of like Berlin solo strings, other libraries like Cinematic Studio solo strings, and Jasper's performance samples solo strings, they have a big emphasis on musicality and legato and just really connected musical performances, which I personally really like. So hence why we're using Berlin solo strings here in this video. But yeah, I also want to turn this into, or kind of share with you my personal approach when it comes to writing for strings, specifically solo strings. I've done plenty of videos on writing for ensemble strings, but solo strings are a different beast altogether because you're really just stripping apart all of the big ensembles, right? You're leaving yourself with, you know, 2, 3, 4 soloists, 5 soloists at the very most. And so because you only have so few instrumentalists and players, you have to really understand what you're doing musically for each of these players, because there's only a certain number of voices are available at our disposal, so we have to use them effectively. And just the overall aesthetic as well, I really love how solo strings afford a more intimate feel. It sounds a lot more cozy in a way, especially if we're going to write in a way that I'm going to do in this video, and I sort of like that personal approach. So let's kind of talk about this library really quickly here. So Berlin Solo Strings is sort of seen as a complementary library to the regular Berlin strings, the Berlin symphonic strings, even the Berlin concertino strings. They're sort of fleshing out the rest of their Berlin series or Berlin strings series libraries with the soloists as well. And they also have their Berlin First Chairs library, which I actually do not own, so I can't do a direct comparison there. But this one kind of offers you a variety of different moods, they call it. There's 3 different legato approaches. So there's one called the expressive sustain. So think of this as your forte fortissimo layer. And then you have cinematic sustains, which hovers around the middle area. So like mezzo piano, mezzo forte. And then you have the saltato sustains and legato, which is more of the piano pianissimo sort of ground. And they play, you know, really delicately as well. So the whole point of these performances is so they give you 3 different styles to play in, whereas if you condense them all into just one patch, where you controlled all those different dynamics with the mod wheel, you might get a lot of different phasing and stuff. But if you have these 3 dedicated performance styles, then you know for sure that you're getting that one style throughout the duration of the mod wheel or for the performances, which is really, really neat. And I believe these styles also come with just one dynamic layer, that one dynamic layer that patch is supposed to serve that purpose, which is pretty cool. So let's have a listen to some of these articulations here. We'll play each of these 3 moods, followed by some of these other articulations, and then we'll hear the dynamics and stuff as well. Let's start with the legato here. Cool. So those are all of the standard articulations. So yeah, with the shorter articulations like the briccato, staccato, spiccato, pizzicato, I think those are all controlled by velocity. So I was playing kind of lightly for some of those, so they didn't really speak too much. But when I played a little bit harder, not only did the intensity from those samples pick up, but also the overall volume. You might have heard it kind of blasted it a little bit louder. So just be aware that the velocity patches for the shorts are pretty sensitive. You might hear pretty loudly. So you might have to do some volume adjustments if you're trying to do some key switching between different articulations here, between longs and shorts. Okay, so just quickly to go into the folder structure, they basically give you two styles or two folders of articulations, longs and shorts, which are sort of the standards. Then you get the dynamics, which includes swells and ornaments as well, like trills and tremolos and stuff like that. So let's have a quick listen to the dynamics and ornaments now. I'm going to solo up the dynamics ornaments patches, and let's have a listen here. So I think it's pretty cool how you have these measured trills. The only other library I know that sort of has something similar is like CSS or CSSS. I believe they both have measured trills, measured tremolos. They have measured tremolos actually, like repeating the same note, but I don't think they actually have measured trills, if I'm not mistaken. Let me know in the comments if I'm incorrect there. But I think this is a pretty cool idea to have measured trills so you can go back and forth between a note at a certain pace, depending on your DAW's tempo. That's a pretty cool idea there. And then with this most recent sign update, you can see what this looks like here with the main tab, controlling the volumes, releases, and the legato, round robins, dynamics, envelopes, and then the legato actual volumes transitions themselves for the legato there. So that's pretty cool. Cool. All right. So with that being said, that's sort of a quick look at the articulations that this library offers. But let's actually take a look at how we might write with this library. So what I decided to do is come up with a piano sketch. And this is something I always recommend to my students when we're writing orchestral music. When it comes to like EDM, pop music, you can get away with not doing a piano sketch because a lot of it maybe isn't melodic based, or it's not really based in chord progressions or anything. It's just a certain groove that you're trying to build, right, from a drum loop or something. But if we have actual melody and chords and stuff like that, then I think a piano sketch is always a good idea to actually get your basic musical ideas down first and then build your orchestrations from on top of that. So just to show you the piano I'm using here, this is going to be the Spotlight piano from Fracture Sounds, probably my favorite piano library from them. So let's have a quick listen to this piano sketch and then we'll start doing our orchestration. All right, so let's have a listen to that one more time and then I'll show you what I'm doing with these strings patches here, which ones I've chosen. So see here in the second half, I'm sort of descending the bass line here for some variation, and then the melody goes up a little higher to finish. So when you have like an 8-bar melody, you just want to kind of, or 8 or 16 bars, whatever you want to call it, there's some variation that can usually happen when you have a basic idea, you try to expand it, and then if the basic idea repeats itself, usually a little bit of variance is a good idea just to keep things interesting and keeping it flowing. Notice here I'm also throwing in some non-diatonic chords here at the end just to, spice it up a little bit, but generally we're remaining relatively diatonic. So in terms of the actual patches I'm going to use here, I'm going to go with the violin, violin 2, viola, and cello. So all 4 instruments that Berlin Solo Strings offers, but I'm going to stick with just the one articulation, the cinematic sustains with legato. So this is the middle of the road legato style, not too expressive. I think that would be a bit overkill for this passage, and not overly soft, not using the saltasto patches because that would be a little too whispery. So I'm going to go with the cinematic sustains here, which sound like this again. I'm going to turn down the piano just a little bit because I don't want that to overpower anything. So now my decision is, do I start by putting down the melody first, or do I put down the bass line first? And typically we're going to go with the violin one for the melody and cello for the bass because the cello is the lowest one here. You might even have the double bass. In that case, we would have a 5th voice, and that could take over the bass line. But in this case, cello is our lowest voice. I'm going to go with my cello voice first. So just outlining the bass line, which in here in this piano sketch, you can see that's the lowest notes right here. So I'm going to try to get all of those in. See if we can do that in one pass. Here we go. All right, pretty cool. So a couple things I'm noticing here. Because these legato patches are one dynamic layer, I'm not going to be able to get huge dynamic variances just because, the mod wheel does have some absolute volume applied to it. Like at the very top of the mod wheel, the sample goes a bit louder, and at the very bottom, it's a little quieter. But because it's one dynamic layer for this legato patch, you're not going to get huge bumps in volume, which is actually a good thing, I think. I want this to be relatively contained. So let's have one more listen here. I think the attack there is a little strong. I'm going to see if I can lower the velocity just to make the attack softer. You can start it a little earlier. So here I can let my string come off a little earlier there. A little early there. And here, because I'm doing a repetition of the same note, I forgot to hold down the pedal, which would activate the same legato, same note repetition legato. So let me put that in really quickly. There we go. So you see that it turned red there for a second. That's because I was pressing down the pedal, so it was showing some new MIDI input. If we take a look here, sustain pedal, you can see I pressed the pedal down right there, and everything else before it doesn't need it. So I'm going to put that at 0. But there I'm holding the sustain pedal down. As you can see, there's the value at 127. So there it activates that same note repetition. Right, you hear the rebow there. Cool. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I do not think that the lowered velocity really did anything to the attack. I think it's still pretty heavy. So that's something I just have to live with. Okay, let's move on now to the melody. And I like to do the top and the bottom voices first, generally because I like to have my extremes laid down first. Meaning that I want the highest notes recorded and the lowest notes recorded so that I know where the extremes are, and after that I can fill in the mid-range. But if I start from one end, let's say the low end, and just build upwards like this, then I don't really know where my limit really is. So I can always go into higher octaves, and I might end up being too high, and I might not like that. So I kind of want to lay down my highest and lowest points first. So now let's go to the violin one and lay down this melody. It's a little bit in the lower end of the violin, but I think because this is a more intimate passage, it can afford that. All right, messed up the melody there a little bit. One thing you'll also notice, though, is that when you're playing these legato patches, if you listen really carefully, on the subsequent note, so the second note of the legato sustain, or this legato transition, you'll hear that after a second or so, there's a little bit of a phasing effect. And that's because the engine is transitioning from the legato transition to the sustained note that I'm playing. So for example, if I play from G to a C, you'll hear that the C, the second note, it does the legato transition to the C, but then after a second or so, you'll hear that bit of phasing as it melds into the C sustain. Right there. Let's try another example. Right, so there's a little bit of phasing as it goes into the sustain sample. I do wish that was a little bit smoother in this library, but other than that, because they only recorded one dynamic layer, everything else is going to be really, really smooth. So as long as you're playing at a decently quick tempo, you're not really going to hear that phasing into the sustain sample. But if you have those longer extended notes, then if your instrument is entirely exposed, you would hear that just a little bit. All right, so let's fix this melody a little bit here. So these notes are going to be a little bit earlier because, number one, because this library has a little bit of delay when it comes to the legato, whereas the piano responds a lot quicker. And also I was trying to remember the melody at the same time, so. Okay, the melody here was supposed to start on C, and then I think I wanted to go up to a G there. Oops, let's see how that sounds. You know what? I might as well just replay this line here. There we go. Just fix the timing here a little bit. That can be coming just a little bit later. Like, this doesn't necessarily have to match the piano perfectly, but just as long as it's in the same ballpark. Let's move these two notes a tad earlier. This one, I think I wanted to do a B here. And then here, I think I wanted to do a repetition. Da, da, da. Let's see. Yeah. So the piano has a repetition there, so I'll put in the pedal here again. There we go. Now we have that repetition sample. Let's just make sure the rest of it is not pedaled. Cool. Alrighty, and now let's kind of fill in these inner voices here. Okay, let's do the violin 2 here. And let's just play the third or so below the violin 1, because the lowest note in the violin is going to be the G, right? Just below middle C. And that fills in my G chord perfectly, which is the first chord here. Oops. Let's do it one more time. Cool. At this point, I'm comfortable enough with the passage to take out the piano. So let's have a listen to just the 3 strings. So here I should have started on A because that's the 3rd below the C, and then going up to the B. Let's see, actually one more time. So the bass is already playing these notes. It's actually just an octave below, as you can see. So here for the violins 2, I can actually, violin 2, let's bring it down to a G actually. So now we have more chord tones. Let's see here. Here, instead of doubling the A with a violin 1, because right now if we took a look at here, both of them are on the A, right? So let's actually stay on the G. And then after that, let's go back up to the A just because, again, G is the lowest note. So I can't really go down to an F sharp to resolve down to the 3rd of the D chord. Okay, here, let's start on the G again. Here, I'm just trying to follow smooth voice leading here because that's the way the passage will lead the most naturally. There we go. And then here, yeah, I'm okay with the C there because I still want that E flat, probably in the viola, just to put in that half diminished sound. Let's see. Here, let's see what happens if we actually stay with the C the whole time. So this is A minor 7, and then D7 with the C in there, and then kind of this enclosure thing happening there. So basically, I'm using the violin 2 to support the violin 1 in terms of the voicing. I don't want it to move exactly at the same time as violin 1 because that would remove any of the independence between the lines. So having a little bit of counterpoint there is nice because it allows for some freedom in these 2 violins. So let's do the viola now. Now, basically, because I'm on my last voice, the idea is to fill it in any of the remaining notes that are missing. So let's have a quick listen here. Okay, so I think I know what I want to do. Let's have a listen here. Cool. Okay. Not bad, not bad. Let's clean this up a little bit though. So the cellos I think is actually coming in a bit early compared to everything else. So let's bring that F sharp a bit earlier. Here, actually, I think the E can come in a bit earlier as well. Okay, I'm going to do some final balancing after as well because I think the violin 1 is a little bit too quiet. Let's see here. So I'm going from E down to D. And let's see what the violin 2 is doing here. Yeah, so that violin 2 is already playing the G there. And the melody is playing the D to the B, so it would make sense for the viola to go down to that D. Now, the reason I'm staying on this D the whole time, and I think I'll go up to the E here actually, is because I'm on the 1 chord, the G chord, And then as the bass descends down to the F, that's basically G7 over F. So we still have the D there. And now this E7 has the D in there as well. So all three chords have D in it, which just makes sense for the viola to stay on that D the whole time. And then here's that E flat for that half diminished sound. Let's double check these last couple chords here just to see if there's any doubling going on here. Because again, because I only have 4 voices, I just want to make sure I'm maximizing my use out of these voices. Here it looks like the bass, the cello and the viola are both playing that D there. So maybe I can use the viola a little bit better. Or I can make the, I can make this cello just go down the octave too. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's a little better actually. And then here, maybe instead of just going to the D right away, I can go up to a G first, down to the F sharp. So like, and then we go down to the D after that. So one more time. Right, so let's shorten this one up here so the releases kind of come up on the same time. Here for the violin 2, maybe I'll also have them replay that C there when we hit that final chord. So yeah, let's just quickly split that and then see what that sounds like. There we go. Make sure the sustain actually applies there to that one repeated note, and then the no sustain for the rest. Okay, that should be fine. So let's see now. The repetition can come in a tad later. Cool. And then for final balancing, maybe I'll bring up violin 1 a bit more. Violin 2 is actually fine volume-wise, but cello is a little loud, I think, and so was the viola. Let's have one more listen here. Oops, sorry about that. Press with my hand. Okay, let's have one more listen here. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I guess the one thing I would like to see a bit more is having that little bit of dynamic variance and attack variation in these patches, just because like for a softer passage like this, I would want a really soft attack at the beginning of the phrase, right? But even though I kind of brought down the velocities of these notes, it still sounds like the attack is quite heavy. So even if I bring down all those velocities, let's see how the attack sounds. Right, so it's maybe a little better, but it's still relatively heavy on the attack. So I might have to start with a softer attack somewhere else, maybe with another library or something. And then at the end of those, I want a little bit more tapering off. And you can see here with the mod wheel data, I actually tried to bring down the mod wheel for the end of that first idea. And then I kind of go up a little bit as we go into the second half of the phrase, go back down again. And generally, when you're playing in notes live or phrases live, you want kind of the mod wheel to follow what the direction of the phrase. That's sort of what I tried to do here. Go up with the phrase and then go back down with the phrase at the very end, because that usually you're trying to mimic the human voice, right? The higher you go, the more emotional the passage is. Usually, the more energy and emotion they're putting into it. Whereas as you come out of the phrase, as you're going towards the end, you tend to pull back a little bit, taper off. But there we go. That's pretty much it. I'm pretty happy with it in terms of the voicings and everything. And I think the overall sound of the library is beautiful. But again, just keep in mind that this approach will not be for everyone. The fact that you have 3 different performing styles sort of to represent the 3 different dynamics, like fortissimo, really passionate, and then one sort of in the middle, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, maybe forte, and then really soft with a saltasto approach. Some people would maybe just prefer a more workhorse library that has that one patch with different dynamic layers recorded for the legato, rather than these three different styles. I think it would have been nice to have both, but naturally they go with the aesthetic they want to market and sell, which totally makes sense. And then again, I would have loved to have the phasing between the legato transitions to the regular sustains be a little bit smoother. Right now, they're a little bit audible. But other than that, I think the legato transitions themselves are very smooth from what I've tried so far. And I think the articulation list they also provide us is relatively comprehensive for, let's say, 80% of the work that you do for solo strings. If you need really aleatoric articulations and other stuff, then other libraries might offer that, but this one is more so for, the regular Berlin series, which focuses more on the traditional style of things. So hopefully that kind of made sense and gave you a sense of how I think about string writing for, this sort of thing is sort of what I would do for ensemble strings anyway, the way I approach these string orchestrations. But the passage itself was inspired by this smaller ensemble. I knew I wanted something a bit calmer and just, more mellow and more reflective because I only had these four instruments, and I knew I wanted that cinematic legato patch, which is sort of the middle of the road, not too passionate, but again, not too quiet either. And I think it worked out. So anyway, there we go. If you want to check out my full composing process though, how I think about coming up with ideas in the first place, turning that into a fleshed out composition, then taking it into an orchestration, mixing and mastering it, finally releasing it, I actually put together a workshop called the Complete Composer's Framework that actually goes through step by step how I think about the whole music making process from the very beginning to the very end. And it's on demand. You can watch it anytime, literally, and it's the first link down below in the description if you want to check that out. And I want to give that to you as a gift for checking out this video today to really help you take that next step in case you want to see how I think about making music from the beginning to the very end. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of sense of this library as well. And if you want to check out the complete library walkthrough though, check out the Orchestral Tools YouTube channel. They have a full dedicated walkthrough going through everything that this library has to offer. So anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one and I'll see you very soon. Take care.